As we go back to the Old Testament in the book of Esther, we reflect on the children of Israel and the Jews in exile 100 years after the Babylonian exile. And what we have in Queen Esther is the niece of Mordecai, who is elevated to be queen by way of really a drunken beauty pageant. It's in the Bible, okay? And I highly recommend reading Queen Esther. And Queen Esther is a fascinating scriptural story because, one, we don't know who the author is. Two, in the sense of the greater majority of the scriptures of that short book, there's really not a lot of reference to God. But when you think about exile, and why the children of Israel were led into exile is because they were ungrateful before God. They dishonored God. And their enemies seized the land. And they were driven from their promise because of their infidelity. And they still enjoy God's favor, God's promise, his covenant, the covenant that he established with Abraham. And what we have in this reading is Queen Esther petitioning God before she is to face the king who has selected her to be the new queen, based on this beauty pageant. And when we look at Queen Esther's petition, this is practically the first cry for help. This is the plea, please, because not only was Esther's life or her uncle Mordecai, their life in danger, but all of the Jews were in danger. There was a plot to eliminate all of them. So she's crying out to God. And how does she cry out? Very curiously, we hear in this reading, she's calling out to God, reflecting on the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. So when the pressures and what surrounds them, everything that limits their freedom takes it away. Notice what this scripture expresses. As a child, I used to hear from the books of my forefathers that you, O Lord, always free those who are pleasing to you. What does that require? That there is a threat to that freedom. They're in exile. Now there's a threat to their very life. And now how does God deliver from that threat? Now help me, who am alone and have no one but you. Now she's in the king's camp. All of the Jews, their last desperate hope is that Esther is going to move the heart of the king against their enemies. Now help me who are alone, and you are my only help, O Lord my God. Now, what do we see? We see children in our Catholic lineage. They're baptized, right? A number of people come and just have their kids baptized because they want the patrimony of their mother or father, or they want to be left in the will. It's true. Right? They really have no real interest in living the Catholic faith. Right? They want to please mom and dad. But when things go bad, my brothers and sisters, where do we find our help? When all of the money dries up, when all the prosperity and the distractions of entertainment and lust and greed, and where do we turn? In war and famine? Why do we see people returning to church now? Making this an intentional thing, even in our own community. It's because when life is threatened, when our freedoms are threatened, when things begin to be stripped away from us, we begin to turn back to God. When we start losing all of the milk and the honey of the promised land. But notice what people are doing. They come back into the church based on their baptismal identity as an identified child of God, and they cry out in the midst of the church, "Lord, save me. You are my only help. You are my only hope." My brother, this happens throughout history. It happens throughout history. It's happening even now. And it's a good thing. It's God's justice. And he's bringing us back because we have turned away from him. So where do we turn back to? We know how Queen Esther's story concludes. Do you? If you don't remember, read it today. Short read. Short read. Gospel passage. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. When we turn, where do we come? To the door. Where do we turn? Back to the church. Back to Christ. There's all sorts of institutions that want to point to the church not doing this, or the church is doing that, or the church was an oppressive institution, or the church is a misogynistic organization, or the church killed so many people in the Crusades, and the church did this, and the church did that, and they draw people away from the church into their institutions to invest their money in. But when everything is gone, everything is turned away, you are no longer of value to them because you're not lining their pockets. What's here? God and his promise for you that you have received in virtue of your baptism. So as we reflect on the revolving world history that is unfolding before us today, in the history of salvation, God's promise is still with his children. And because of Jesus Christ, we are a part of that lineage of the children of Israel that enjoys Abraham's covenant. We are many. And I believe before time, God in eternity has seen each of us participating in this beautiful return. It is good that we are here. It is good that you are here. To knock and the door be open to you. And salvation, success, and victory over the enemy, and a bounty beyond all telling. And the treasures that overflow 100-fold.